Welcome to Body Bags, presented by City of First Cremation and Funeral Services. I'm Jeremy Geiger, one of the co-owners, and my co-host is Kimberly Rose, the other co-owner of the funeral home. Today on this episode, we're going to kind of talk about some green burials, some alternatives to what we are typically used to. I know we've kind of covered these topics a little bit before, but Sherry 5107 had a question. She says she doesn't want to be embalmed. She's not a fan of cremation. What are these other choices that may be available for her to seek out? She brings up about maybe like green burials. Is that a possibility? Is it contaminating the earth and the soil? What kind of regulations are there? Is it more expensive? Is it less expensive? So we're just going to kind of jump into some of that and talk about what we can kind of do here in our state of Indiana, and then things that are outside of our state. So green burial in our state is not a very progressive topic in our opinion. We don't have very many choices. Kim's been working with a family recently trying to help them explore that option of where they could be buried, what those requirements are. And as she's made some of these contacts and phone calls, she's learned that each location has a little bit different requirement on what they consider quote unquote a green burial. Mm-hmm. Some allow that these bodies be embalmed with a green burial embalming fluid, which doesn't pollute the soil or anything. Others say absolutely no embalming.
Right.
Some of them are allowing you to bury in a wooden box with just glue and no metal or finish to it.
Some are no cremation too.
Yeah, because it's really not considered green if we're talking cremation, because there's a use of energy. So
the emissions
that are out there, yeah. A lot of times they just want the body covered in a shroud, some kind of linen or cotton sheet, and it just breaks down naturally with the body. But outside of that in our state, there's really not anything else. We don't do aquamation. We don't do alkaline hydrolysis for cremation. If you explore the cremation side and choose to do like a bio-living tree, which is a seedling or sapling of a tree that we plant with the cremated remains, and it gets encased in the root ball of that tree as it continues to grow over the years. But that's really the end of it, and it's kind of sad. So if you're looking for other forms, you probably need to be looking in other states. There's things like body composting in Florida and in Washington, where they place your body in a vat, and it's with composted soil and microbes, and they turn the body and work it over and produce this real nutrient-rich soil. There's other places that allow things like a mushroom suit, where think of it as a big Tyvek suit, and it's got a hood to it and everything, and you place the body in there and you zip it up, and it's got mushroom spores encased in that suit, and you bury the body naturally without a casket or a vault, and lo and behold, in a few years, mushrooms start popping up from where your body was at.
I wonder if you could eat them though.
You know, I don't know what type of mushrooms they are. I don't know if you get to pick those or anything. It would be kind of neat if you had a homestead and that's what you chose to do, and thinking that grandma or grandpa continued to provide nutrients and food supply through the early year. You never know, it could be a late fall mushroom too that could arise out of it. Pretty interesting thought process to that. Another interesting alternative is what Sherry kind of mentioned was an earth pod. It's very similar to that mushroom suit. It's kind of a bag-shaped round container or bag, and the body is placed in it kind of in a fetal position, and it is buried and a tree is planted on top of it, and you end up providing nutrients for that tree and being encased into the root ball as it continues to grow. But the green burial side of things, definitely I've heard more questions and inquiries over the years. It's still nothing that's really picking up, in my opinion. I think it's going to be something that the people want to demand from the funeral service industry for better choices, and it, well, bless you. It may be even talking to your state representatives to try to get some of the laws changed where they can accept some of these new forms of disposition. We're dealing with different generations and different schools of thought on how to honor their loved one, and whether it's a form of a memorial service or a funeral service, or a way of saying your final goodbye by burying them or scattering them or cremating them. It's pretty interesting to see different viewpoints of how people think the disposition should be. I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I think it's what the conversations were with that deceased on trying to follow what their wishes were.
I like it.
You like the thoughts of green burials?
I do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I know you're predominantly a cremation person. That's your true wish once you pass.
And scattering and in the ocean. So.
Yeah. So you kind of.
I mean, my original plan is I would prefer my body just to be dumped out in the ocean. That's my form of green, but.
Just roll you off back deck,
me off.
Right into the water, kaplunk.
Yes. That's my form of green.
That's interesting. I don't know that the Coast Guard or the government would really like the thought of that. I don't know if you could call it a slip and fall accident. She fell and hit her head and sunk. It went quick and fast. I don't know what to tell them, but that's interesting. We don't hear of that too often. I know. There are opportunities for military servicemen that are particularly in the Navy that they can have a burial at sea. Mm-hmm. And typically they use a Ziegler case, which is a metal casket that there were different points where they would weld the lid shut. Then there was times where they were riveted. I believe now it snaps, locks, and then there's bolts that go around the Ziegler case. It's something we don't typically use in the funeral industry. There are a few countries that is their shipping requirement, that it's sent in a Ziegler case. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to think that would be a great form of disposition, and it's not really explored more than the military doing that. I kind of like it. So there you go, Sherry. There's another idea to add to your list. We can make that E and F. I know you asked me if I was related to Mary Ellen Geiger. I absolutely am not. My only relation here in Indiana are my parents, and we're all originally from Akron, Ohio. So none of these individuals that are here are related to me. Growing up in the area, it was funny, I did get phone calls. Is there a Mark Geiger there at the house? Once I moved to Kokomo in 2012, I started hearing of Mary Ellen Geiger. My daughter goes to Western. There was a student and a teacher. I believe Mary was the teacher that was there. But yeah, no relation of mine.
One of her other questions was setting the features. What is that?
What is setting the features? Ooh, that's a good one. When we talk about setting features, it's your facial expressions, it's the placement of the hands. We use eye caps, which are like hard plastic. You'll have to go back into early episodes, and I do show you what
Episode
those
1 or 2.
yeah, what an eye cap is. But it's a hard plastic. Think of it as like a contact lens. It has some ridges to it to help hold the eyelid down and not let it separate as time goes on after the embalming process. So we're placing those eye caps in. Usually we're using a Vaseline product, something to kind of hydrate and keep that eyelid nice and hydrated, and we don't fight that brown orangish line that comes with that dehydration. The next thing that we're looking at is we're looking at closing the mouth. There's a couple of ways we can address closing the mouth. I personally prefer mandibular suture. I know Kim's more of a needle injector person, but
We don't have a needle injector, so I've been forced to
do the
which I still don't do the mandibular suture.
no, she takes the third option, which is the muscular suture. So the needle injector will kind of hit that. It's looks like a, doggone it, that word always slips my mind. I want to say BB, and it's not. It's like a pellet, like a pointed pellet. And it has a wire, stainless steel wire typically on the end of that pellet. And it goes into the gun with the point sticking out, and it is placed into the gum line where the mandible is. You're trying to not get into one of the sinus cavities, and you're trying not to destroy the mandible, because it can happen depending on the person's condition. It could be poor hygiene, or it could just be they've been down for so long that area is compromised and not as strong as it used to be. But you pull the trigger, and it has a hammer, and it hits that pellet, and it drives it down into the bone, into the mandible, and then you kind of twist that together, take your wire cutters, snip it, tuck back that wire so that it doesn't poke. The other one of her choices, which is the muscular suture, she's going to go through the bottom of the lower lip in the muscle area along the mandible and lip. And then she'll do a loop and come back through. Then she goes through the septum and then back down. And then she ties that, and it's done with string or ligature. There was a tricky word for the day. And then that's cut, laid back. My preferred way, and the reason why I like the mandibular, is I feel if I need to make adjustments, it's easy to untie and do. If I have an issue later on, I can fix that simply by going in and removing the cotton. The issue would be purging. Sometimes we have bodies that emit fluid from their mouth and nose, and sometimes their ears even. Just depends on what's going on. But that cotton that's in their mouth to kind of give that natural mouthful and cheek expression is it gets saturated with purge, and it stinks, so you got to get in there and clean it out sometimes. But I go down through the back side of the mandible, out through the bottom of your chin. I go back in through that same hole, through the front side of the mandible, still behind your bottom lip. Then I'll come up to the top, and then I'll go through your septum, and then back down, and then I tie it in a knot, cut my string. Like I said, always leave extra, because if you got to get back in there, you don't.
Which I always tie in a bow.
Yeah, Kim ties it in a bow. I typically just do a double knot and then leave about 2-3 inches to work with. And then we lay that cotton in there to kind of smooth things out on the teeth. And we will make sure the cheeks have great form, because what most people probably don't realize, when we see people on a daily basis, we're upright and gravity's pulling us straight down. When we're dead, you're laying on a table and gravity's pulling things the opposite direction of what we're used to seeing. So your cheeks kind of go flat, your lips will go flat. So those are things we want to counteract as we're setting these features, by using the cotton to kind of pad and build things up. We'll even take cotton and make little balls to put underneath the earlobes, because some people have longer earlobes than others, but they'll lay back against their neck and their skull. So we put that cotton in there to kind of push it out while we're embalming. It firms that tissue up. Cotton comes out. Boom. Ears look nice. Everything's great. We also may use that cotton to maybe work on a facial expression. We don't want to give you an unpleasant look. You don't want to have maybe a sad facial frown. So we're trying to get those corners peaked up a little bit. We're looking at your lips. We're looking for the weather line that's on the lips. And the weather line is where it's typically exposed to the environment. And then on the inside of that weather line is where it's moist and it's pink. It's more healthy looking tissue on the inside. So that is setting the features on the face. I typically shave every person, male or female, because when we put cosmetic on, even though most of you females have very beautiful skin and facial, you do have some fine hair when we start some peach fuzz when we start putting on those cosmetics. It stands out more, so we just eliminate it from the get-go. There are certain occasions that I'll leave maybe grandma's mole that has 2 or 3 fine gray hairs that are coming off of it.
Yeah.
I know that that's important to the kids and the grandkids. It's one of those memories that they have. So I'll leave some of those things that I see are maybe neat features or beauty features in my opinion. If you're a man and you have facial hair and I'm not sure what we're doing, I'm leaving it just because it's easier to go back and remove it than to try to figure out how to put it back on.
Yeah.
So, but that kind of covers your questions, Sherry, and it kind of hits on the topics of green burials and other forms of disposition in our state. I just wish we were a little more progressive in those points, because it is something that is becoming a newer topic of discussion in the death industry, and we're trying to navigate it. We don't really have the best answers, and we need also leadership from our legislation to be able to know how to proceed with what rules and regulations are to dispose of these individuals going that way. So that kind of wraps up this episode. I'm going to leave you with an interesting story that kind of ties in with your feature setting question. There was a moment I was working at a funeral home, and we had an intern that was working on this embalming, and they did not think to come up and talk to anybody, and the director in charge didn't think to notify this intern of, don't shave anything off. Well, the gentleman was clean shaved, but man, he had one gorgeous looking mustache. I mean, it was perfectly white, well shaped, very well groomed. And the next thing you know, the director comes up to me to ask me to scan a picture, and I see it, and I'm like, yeah, that's the guy I picked up last night. Man, that was a heck of a mustache. He goes, yeah, they've been telling me they've been preparing for the last couple months of Dad's passing. So they've really been working on this mustache, getting it groomed, because it was important that Dad had this mustache. And I'm like, yeah, it's there, man. It's beautiful. And he said, it's not anymore. Excuse me? What do you mean it's not anymore? He said, just scan that picture and give it back to me, and if you could go back to the prep and kind of assess the situation. Okay. So I get the picture scanned, and I printed me a copy, because if I'm needing to look at it, it's probably important I take it with me. I walked back to the prep, and the intern chopped that mustache plumb off. I mean, dude was baby faced. And I said, oh no, this isn't going to be good. And he was extremely sorry, remorseful. I said, it's okay, we're going to get through this, and it's going to be a great learning experience for you. I said, I'll get the things that we need tonight, and tomorrow I'll see you in the morning. It's going to take us a while to do this, but you can come in the morning and we're going to do this together. Well, that next day was the intern's day off. I knew that, but I also thought that your mistake, it's going to cost you. At least it didn't cost you much money. It's just going to cost you your time. So I got there and I started, I took a piece of bang from a wig shop. And it was the closest to the color of what the mustache was. It had some light gray fleck in there too. And I sat and I cut the bangs at the length of what the mustache was. I then took a very fine layer of wax over the upper lip, and I sat for the entire day placing each individual hair, making sure that it laid in the right direction, it was all uniform. The gentleman who was the intern came over that evening after everybody gone home. He was completely impressed. The director was impressed. The family had no idea what had transpired. The only thing they said to us after the service was, that was a hell of a mustache on Dad, wasn't it? So, it was important for him to learn. He had lots of questions, of course, the day he decided to show up. I wasn't too willing to share what I did with him and where I got the supplies that I was needing to do this.
Since he didn't show up.
Since he didn't show up, it wasn't a lesson that he needed to learn.
Yeah.
But
he wasn't ready to learn.
So that's an important lesson for any of you funeral directors or embalmers or people that are interested in going into this industry. If you're uncertain, stop and ask questions. It's super important because it'll save you a huge headache later on. I couldn't imagine of being the director going to that family and saying, I'm really sorry, but we cut that mustache off. It probably wouldn't have went very well. They would have been extremely upset with it, and it would have let the deceased down as well. So that was one of my neat restorative art stories for you. Thanks for joining in. If you got any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. As always, please like, follow, subscribe, and share. And this concludes our services here today at City of First. You have a great day. Bye.
Bye.